Hi, of course, we're
Feeling tired today.
right.
Blue bar.
That's the chairman, he might.
What's MRSA stand
The new records, the new. City just got a new website.
Regulations, statutory, so it's laws basically.
Yeah.
We're all
This
going
doesn't
to
matter.
get
Don't
around.
forget that round.
We are live.
But I- You're live.
Yep.
It's just happened in the last couple of
Good
days.
evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Bangor's Planning Board meeting of November 19th, 2024. My name is Reese Perkins, Chairman of the Board. Other board members in attendance this evening include Vice Chair Ted Brush, Mike Basnet, Jonathan Boucher, Tricia Hayes, Janet Jonas, and alternate member Jennifer King. Member King is filling in and voting for member Mahar, who has resigned. Board members are volunteers from the Bangor community, and so we certainly appreciate their time and their work for us. City staff members in attendance this evening include Planning Officer Anya Collette, Assistant Solicitor Grace Innes, City Engineer Jefferson Davis, and Planning Analyst Brian Scannell. We thank them all for their help this evening with the meeting. I do want to just kind of update a few of the people things that have happened recently since we last met, because there have been a number of them, and it's been a bit since we met. Member Boucher and Member Hayes have both been reapproved for their membership for, I think you guys probably know that, but probably the other members don't, for new terms starting next year. Congratulations on that. Former member Ken Hume has also been approved, so we will have a what I consider a really good experienced board starting in January. City Engineer Jefferson Davis is now city engineer, not just interim city engineer, so congratulations there as well.
Congratulations.
And Anya Collette, as I think all board members heard, has passed certification and is now an official planner, so that's awesome as well.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
But yes.
All right, any speeches?
No, thank you.
All right, congratulations to everyone. The planning board has two roles. First, we review amendments to the land development code, which typically include either changes to zoning districts or changes to text within the code. Our review of these amendments include adherence to the comprehensive plan, as well as considering any applicable concerns from the public. Our vote on these items is in the form of a recommendation to the city council as to whether the item ought to pass or ought not to pass. The city council makes the final decision on land development code changes. There is one item on the agenda this evening that falls into that category. Second, we serve as the regulatory authority for land development permits, commonly known as site plan review. Site plans are reviewed to ensure compliance with city code as to parking, driveways, stormwater management, lighting, landscaping, buffering, etc. We also ensure the plan meets the dimensional requirements for the project's zoning district. We review larger site plans that trigger site location development for the main DEP as well under their regulations. Some uses are conditional uses that have specific conditions and requirements we use to review the project. State statute also outlines the requirements for subdivision review, and the city has additional standards as to roadway and utility specifications. Subdivision is primarily defined as a development with 3 or more dwelling units. The board ultimately endorses a plan that will go to the Registry of Deeds if the plan is approved. The last two items on the agenda fall into that category. Information on the city's codes and standards, as well as the comprehensive plan, can be found on the city's website. We will present tonight's business as it appears on the agenda with a couple of exceptions. We will start with the old business items, the first of which was to be an executive session. And then we will continue on with new business, which includes the zone change and the site plan review items as we just described. At the request of the city solicitor, we have decided to cancel the executive session. And the reason for that is just simply there really isn't any new information, so he doesn't really have anything to tell us And it just really isn't worth the effort of getting us all into executive session to tell us really nothing. I did ask him to promise, and I think he will, to keep us informed of any updates to that item. And this is the Aroma Joe's, in case anyone didn't remember what that was. So that is not going to happen this evening. For zone change and site plan reviews, we will ask the applicant to briefly present their project or their proposal. The applicant or their representative should come forward to the podium and provide a brief introduction. Some of the items on the agenda this evening are staff and/or board-led items. For these, staff or the chair, or in this case, a consultant also, may provide a brief introduction. Further details on the projects and proposals are in the board members' packets. Once the presentation on an item has been made, we consider any questions from the staff and/or board members. For most items, we will then open the floor to public comments. If there are any comments from the public, we ask that the person come to the podium and introduce themselves, state where they are from, and indicate whether they are for or against the proposal. Either way, it is helpful if you present your thoughts based upon the city code and/or the comprehensive plan, as these are the primary documents used by the board to make their decisions. If you are on Zoom, please use the raised hand function to let us know you would like to speak, and we can bring you into the meeting. Let's see. All comments and discussion should remain respectful and considerate of all others. Seems like a pretty good crowd this evening, but anyway, we don't want fights to break out. Once public comments are completed, we will close that item to the public comments. Finally, if a vote is needed on an item, the board will then deliberate and vote on the item using the codes and standards as I've indicated. Most items require a majority of votes for board approval. So with that all said, the old business that we started with, the executive session, was the first item that's canceled. So the next item on the agenda would be the meeting minutes from October 15th, 2024. So I would look to board members to indicate if they had any issues or changes with those meeting minutes. If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the October 15th, 2024 meeting minutes. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as presented for
Thank
the
you.
October 24th meeting.
Thank you. And a second by Member Bazinet. Thank you. And so roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so unanimous approval of the meeting minutes from October 15th, 2024. The next item on the agenda is the land use code update discussion. I'm gonna turn that over to Planning Officer Collette and let you kind of take it from there.
Yep, so I'm actually gonna have our consultant, Chris Jeanette from Myers, to talk about that. Presentation.
Hey, Chris, welcome.
I'm a bit of a notorious low talker, so I'll turn this
Yeah,
off.
and tap it on that won't. You won't hear anything in here. That's really only sending it out there, so
Sure.
just have to do the best you can.
Yeah, will do. Okay, we should be a well-oiled machine at this point. This is our third time doing this together, so. Really happy to be here tonight and talk to you guys about a little bit about the process that we're just kicking off for the land development code update that we're calling Blueprint Bangor. A little bit about me and our firm first. So my name is Chris Jeanette. I'm a principal with Camiros. I've been with the firm for almost 15 years at this point. I'm a landscape architect by training, but kind of fell into the regulatory side of things and have just kind of gotten comfortable living in this world. We are a national zoning practice, so we work in communities large and small all around the country. We're also a multidisciplinary firm, so we do landscape architecture, urban design, corridor planning, downtown planning, and a lot of zoning. You can go ahead. So some examples of projects that we worked on recently: Baltimore, Maryland, New Orleans, Louisiana. We've got a lot of New England experience recently. We just wrapped up in Portland, Maine earlier this month. We're currently also working with Bath. We have wrapped up in Keene, New Hampshire somewhat recently, Providence, Rhode Island, Saratoga Springs. So we have a lot of experience in this region as well. In terms of how we think about land development codes and regulations, we're not dogmatic, so we're not going to be a group of people that comes in and says, you know, a form-based code is the right approach for Bangor. We don't know what the right approach is yet. And you know, typically the way that we undertake these processes is that we like to have lots of conversations at the outset, really identify the problems, comb through the code, see what needs to be addressed, and then develop solutions specific to each one of those issues. So in some cases that might be a more sort of Euclidean or use-based zoning approach. In some cases, you know, like maybe downtown, it is a form-based approach, but we like to suss out exactly what the issues are first and then bring forward approaches that we think might work, with the intent being that Bangor's code really should address Bangor's issues and not some other community's issues. We leverage a lot of geographic information systems analysis in our work as well, so that is really just kind of a fancy way of saying, looking at all the city's data in terms of land use and mapping and the size of parcels. And what we do with that information is we really look to compare on the ground or developed conditions with what the code's currently requiring, and oftentimes that allows us to see disconnects between what the text wants to see on the ground and the way that the city has developed over time, right? And as we're doing that, we can identify issues and begin to test solutions and bring forward things that we think might work. As part of that process, you'll see us produce a lot of sort of maps and build out analyses and educational materials to really help bring the public along, bring boards and commissions along, and make sure that we can facilitate understanding and useful discussion and decision-making throughout the process. As the land development code is really the primary tool for implementation of the comprehensive plan, that's the kind of guiding star document that we have to use. And so we've started to look through and pull out some thematic categories from the comprehensive plan. The first one of those is housing diversity and availability and affordability. So we're going to look at ways to help increase the supply of housing within the community, provide a variety of housing options for residents of Bangor, whether they're people that are, you know, empty nesters looking to downsize or young families looking for a larger home, and kind of the whole gamut in between, making sure that there is opportunity for everyone and choice for everyone who wants to live in Bangor. Also looking to increase the supply of housing in and around downtown, as that was one of the key recommendations of the comprehensive plan. Provide opportunities for those people who want to live a little bit closer to transit, who maybe want to be able to walk to meet their daily needs. And really just expanding the city's palette of tools in terms of how it can address housing. So things like adaptive reuse permissions for existing structures, whether those are residential or non-residential. Conversion of existing residential structures, things like cluster development, and expanding the approach to things like tiny home parks that are already within the code. Oh, Brian, you're doing it. I was like, Anya, come on. We are also taking guidance from the plan in terms of protecting environmentally sensitive areas and making sure that the code is really working to direct growth to those areas of the community that have the infrastructure to support it. So those areas within the growth boundary that's been identified within the comprehensive plan. Looking at things like comprehensive landscape requirements to make sure that everything that's in the code is really supporting the city's goals around mitigation of things like heat island effect, providing critical habitat, intercepting stormwater, all of those types of considerations. And making sure that, again, we are incentivizing and thinking about infill development and how the city can continue to grow within the established growth boundary. Go ahead, Brad. In terms of supporting economic development, we want to take a look and really make sure that the code is working to support pathways to entrepreneurship within the community. So that could be introducing some new uses like co-working spaces, business incubators, those types of things. Making sure that the regulations really support downtown and investment in downtown as really the center of the region. And reviewing and updating the whole span of commercial zoning within the city. To make sure that the flexibility is there for Bangor to respond to market conditions as they might change over the next few years. We know that there were tremors sent through the market, both at the beginning of COVID and now in post-COVID, and a lot of things have changed, and we need to be able to anticipate more change in the future. And so looking at things like expanding mixed use options and opportunities within the palette of mixed use zones, expanding allowed uses, thinking about emerging uses or newer kind of modern uses that we can add to the code, evaluating and updating the industrial districts to make sure that we have tools to accommodate all different kinds of industrial, some of which are lower impact and that could fit within different contexts within the city, and then expanding opportunities for neighborhood commercial uses as well. The comprehensive plan also speaks to considerations of transportation and accessibility. So we want to really make sure that we're encouraging and accommodating multimodal transportation options, understanding that while the city really is still kind of an auto-oriented community, there are many people within Bangor that would choose not to drive a car if they had an option, or maybe they don't have the ability or the means to drive everywhere. And then finally, in terms of social service considerations, understanding that the city is really the social service hub of the region, the code needs to be able to accommodate in a way that makes sense those types of uses that really benefit vulnerable populations. So we have really just kicked off in September. We jumped into the pool and are trying to figure out exactly what's in the code. And so we've got some preliminary observations, not key answers at this point, but just kind of a direction that we think that we're heading. First one of those is improving the code's organization. It's difficult to use right now. It's difficult to find what you're looking for. Sometimes you have to look in 4 or 5 places to get the full scope of a regulation. So what we want to do is bring like regulations together, make sure that they're all grouped in a way that makes sense. So you look in one place and you find the answer that you need. We want to improve the legibility of the code, bring in more graphics, more diagrams, more matrices, put things in tables so that they can be really easily read and understood at a glance, both by people who are using the code all the time, as well as people who use the code infrequently. And then finally, updating and clarifying things like definitions and measurement methodologies that are in there. These sort of establish the common language of the code, and so we need to make sure that things are defined clearly, things are defined only once, and that measurement methodologies are really clearly laid out in the code to really incentivize and encourage consistent application of the code standards. In terms of uses, we would recommend that they be organized into a global use matrix, which there's an example of on the following slide. Instead of the kind of current lengthy lists of uses that are included within each one of the zoning districts, we want to clarify exactly what we mean by different types of uses, so principal uses versus what's an accessory use or what's a temporary use. Consolidating and reorganizing the use standards within the code, so certain uses are subject to standards. Sometimes those can be included within those lengthy lists that I was talking about, sometimes they can be included within the definition of that use. We want to kind of grab all of those, pull them apart, put them back together in one place and make sure that they're referenced in the matrix. Address emerging and creative uses. I mentioned these. They can be things like industrial design, specialty food services, which could be like coffee roasters or candy makers that kind of don't fall cleanly into existing categories. And then look at, like I mentioned, providing more opportunities for neighborhood commercials. So, we know right now there are kind of existing corner stores that are allowed in certain zoning districts. Are there opportunities for us to maybe take guidance from the comprehensive plan and allow more opportunities for that kind of thing to happen? And then finally, evaluating and updating standards around things like manufactured home parks and tiny home parks, as those are within the city as well. So this is just an example of a use matrix. As you're squinting at it, you won't be able to make anything out, but you can see there are really kind of 2 primary ways that this is useful. It gathers all of the uses and all of the districts together in one place. So say that I own property in a particular zoning district, I can find that column and scan down to see what uses are allowed. Or similarly, if I have an idea for a business, I want to come into Bangor and start an arts and fitness studio, like Pilates studio. I can find that use in the table, scan across and say, oh, I need to look for land or property in these particular zoning districts. Speaking of the zoning districts, we're going to recommend that they're restructured and aligned with the future land use plan within the comprehensive plan. That means looking at things like lot sizes, dimensional standards, potentially adding some more urban districts into the mix, making sure that the commercial district structure is really capturing the full spectrum of commercial and mixed use as it occurs within the city. So that means those little neighborhood nodes that I was talking about, corridor commercial, where you could see a kind of a strip pattern of development along some of the major corridors within town, and then also sort of the big regional stuff, just making sure that there are tools within the code to address each one of those types of development. Making sure that we're considering new approaches to handling industrial. So in addition to kind of the traditional light industrial, heavy industrial paradigm, thinking about, is there a mixed use variant that could work its way in? Where some of those older industrial structures are starting to turn over, maybe they've outlived their useful lives in terms of their original intended use, but they'd be a great place for a brewery, or they'd be a great place for, it's always a CrossFit gym, or a dog daycare, or indoor soccer, or those types of uses. Making sure that we're integrating dimensional standards and the dimensional tables into the districts. It took me forever to find where those were, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And then bringing in design standards as well into the district structure. We want to make sure that we're simplifying and clarifying all the dimensional stuff that's in here. So being really clear about, what's a side yard versus what's a corner side yard versus what's a front yard. And also building in some key flexibilities that I'm sure you guys are dealing with all the time. Looking at things like, there are some minor yard and area variations that are allowed right now by the CEO. Looking at things like front setback averaging that's allowed, setback reductions, area and width reductions. If we can build some flexibilities into the base standards of the code and just allow those things to happen if certain criteria are met, that'll be a much more flexible and workable approach for a lot of people. In terms of parking and site development standards, we're going to be looking at updating all of the parking ratios that are in the code. They're currently on the high side for a community like Bangor. Considering additional parking flexibilities, if there might be opportunities to expand current exemptions or flexibilities outside of just the downtown. Considering if there maybe is a place for parking maximums in certain places within the city. Addressing things like parking lot landscape. So how much parking lot landscape do I have to have? What does it have to look like? How many trees? What types of trees do I need to put in my parking lot? And then bringing in things like buffer standards, which currently live as another attachment outside the code, reorganizing, reevaluating those and bringing them into the code itself. And then also looking at things even like lighting standards that are currently within the code. So we are just at the beginning of our process. Which is really a 3-phase process. The first phase is going to culminate in what we call a technical review report, which will be the first kind of public-facing document coming out of our process. It'll be sometime in the spring. It's going to synthesize all of our evaluation and the conversations that we've had with folks, identify a series of key issues and say, here's what we want to do. Hopefully get a lot of public feedback around that, build consensus, and then move forward into phase 2, which is drafting. So it's an iterative process, really us working with staff, on a working committee draft, moving that into revisions and eventually into a public draft, getting feedback on the public draft, likely toward the fall or winter of next year, and then moving into public hearings after that. All told, it's a 23-month process the way that we've scoped it out, so there's going to be time for everybody to read and digest and respond. With that, that's the entirety of the presentation. I know it was a lot, but happy to take any questions or comments that y'all may have.
So before we get to board member questions and comments, I just promised Anya that I would open this up to public comments as well, because, and maybe Anya, you can say what you've been doing with public information meetings and stuff. Do you want to do that first?
Sure.
Just so the board knows?
Yeah, so we've been doing a bunch of neighborhood meetings so far. I think we've done 3. We have one planned for tomorrow, and then we have some planned early December in different locations in the city, just so we can talk to people about zoning in their current neighborhoods and different priorities they have. Also, street safety and where they think there's a need for like bike lanes and stuff like that. It's not exactly related to the land development code, but complete streets and land development are tied together. So we just wanted to get the public's feedback too on how the zoning and how the land development code is working for you. And this influences what you all are here for tonight too, and how you go about development in the city. So that's really just what we're trying to do. So.
Yeah, thank you. So I just promised that, since we're trying to get as much public feedback as we can, I would open this up to public comments just in case there are any. So I will open this item up to public comments. If anyone is here who would like to speak on this topic of the land use code updates, we're happy to have them step forward. If not, I'll just go right to board thoughts on this item. Seeing no public comments needed, let's just close the public comments on that, and board members. Any feelings on this issue? Must have.
Are we, so I have one.
Member Boucher.
The end result, we were talking about possibly some consolidation of zones and also some creation of new zones. Would they be applied, let's say retroactively to all the existing places, or would it be when someone comes forward with a zone change request, we would make some sort of discussion there? What I'm saying is everyone who's URD 1 or URD 2, and if there's gonna be a new urban item, I'm just wondering what happens if there are changes to existing zones that's made at that level, and if there's any grandfathering that's gonna, because it's a lot of change that could happen, but presumably very little, it won't be disruptive, but I think there's people will likely come out of this with more options for their what they can do with their property rather than some sort of restriction placed on them. But I'm just trying to understand what this might look like. You said this has happened at a couple other places. In Portland, for instance, Portland, is your engagement ended? Did the 24-month period end already?
It was adopted at the beginning of this month. So the new code in Portland will go into effect at the beginning of December. And I can just talk about how this typically works. It's going to be a whole new map, right? So if we're revising the zones, typically what we will do is we won't just sort of wipe the slate clean and say none of these zones exist anymore. You know, if things that are working, then we're not just going to throw those things out, right? So typically it's, you know, looking at the zone structure saying, well, you know, the way that Bangor has developed over time versus what's in the code, we can see a clear gap here. You know, there might be a need for a new urban residential zone that just doesn't exist now. So you might see new zones show up on the map, and that would be a rezoning. You might see existing zones become modified. And oftentimes, you know, like you said, we're not going to be reducing development potential in a lot of these places. We're not looking to create new nonconformities. Oftentimes, what we're looking to do through adjusting the zone structure and changing things like dimensional requirements is to bring more things into conformance, right? You're never going to completely eliminate non-conforming elements, so there are always going to be sort of those outliers that aren't going to meet the standards of the code. But the intent is to really build in a code that addresses both how the city wants to develop as well as how the city currently is developed. And so at the end of this process, and obviously we need to work through mapping, there will be a new map that corresponds to the new code. And if things, you know, change within certain districts and become non-conforming, they would just become legally non-conforming and allowed to continue, just similar to how they would now.
I have a follow-up question.
Please.
Yeah, you mentioned nonconformities, and I don't know if our data that's available to you indicates the sort of presence and proliferation of existing nonconformities. I'm thinking of a lot of our URD 1 locations where they're actually, you know, there's too many units built on them or something to that effect, and they've sort of been grandfathered in through nonconformity. But is that data that's available in what you guys are able to look at to understand the lay of the land, so to speak?
Off the top of my head, I cannot remember if there are unit counts.
There are in the
There
tax
are.
data, so
Okay,
we can
yep.
see that,
Yeah, so
Because
we'll look
sometimes
at,
it just looks like all URD 1, but really
sure,
it's more like a checkerboard
Yeah.
yep.
out there in places.
And that impacts, right, if you know, a certain amount of lot area is required per unit, and we need to know how many units are there, really kind of.
And it
figure
kind of
out.
denotes a sort of what the neighborhood dynamic is, that even though it looks like it's a consistent URD, there's much more of a mix in a lot of these neighborhoods that might just look green on the map.
Yep. Absolutely. Right.
Other board comments, questions? You had a page 10 up there that just struck me. I'll just comment that.
Okay.
I have always found our code terrible to work with. I mean, it's, you know, as you pointed out, and I'm not saying anything I don't think anyone else knows, but, you know, trying to find something simple like how many units are allowed in this particular zone for this property is very difficult.
Yep.
And And I feel I have some experience with this, just being on the board. I sympathize with the public who takes a look at our code and just has no idea. And our staff is fantastic at helping the public, but it still means that has to be done because the code is just so hard to work with. So that, what you had on page 10 where you spoke about the things that are wrong or things that are difficult about our code and directions that we could go in with that, I just completely applaud that. I think we badly need it, and if it can get done in 24 months. I know Portland's was something like 6 years, right? But they went through kind of a 2-phase process, as I understand.
Yep.
And so I, you know, if we can get through this in 24 months, I think that would be fantastic. I think it's badly needed.
Yeah, and you know, it's not uncommon for codes of the age of Bangor's to kind of turn into this over a while, right? Because, you know, over time, they start out slightly disorganized and then they get amended and amended and amended and amended. And, you know, the junk drawer gets created, you got all the supplementary materials and we don't know where to put it, so let's just put it in that chapter. And over time, things just become unwieldy, so.
Yeah, many of the things that you spoke of, tiny homes, mobile home parks, things like that, we've done that. It's in there.
Yep.
But I think the organization of the whole package, at least the 165 package, is very difficult. So, yeah. Any other comments? If not, Chris, I appreciate your presentation. You don't have to stick around. We are going to deal with some of this evening, which is going to be interesting. But we appreciate your presentation, and we look forward to getting more information from you.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, no vote necessary on that item, so we'll move right on to the bylaw amendments. And I don't have any real additional comments on the bylaws. Do you, Planning Officer Collette?
I don't.
So it really, all we're looking for this evening is just to approve the changes to the bylaws that we've kind of worked on over the course of this year, so that we have some good bylaws to work with for the board. Unless board members have any other changes, I would look for a motion to accept the bylaws as they were provided in the packet for this evening, and then we can move on to new business. Member Boucher.
Yeah, I move that we accept the bylaws as noted in our packet.
Thank you. And a second on that? Member Jonas, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval of our bylaws. We now have a new set of bylaws. I think that's exciting. And encourage you to go through it as you have time if you have questions on our processes. So let's move on to new business, which I'm sure you folks out there would be happy to see us do. By the way, for the board, the pre-approved building plans presentation that was originally in your agenda was postponed until 12/3, the next meeting, because of scheduling conflicts. So we're going right to land development code amendments. Code amendment, really, there's just one. And this item is to amend the land development code by changing a portion of a parcel of land located at 12 Wiley Street at map lot 021007 from urban residence 1 to multifamily and service district. Said area of land contains approximately 0.08 acres total and is more particularly indicated on a map that is attached and in your packet and made a part thereof. The applicant is Rihanna L. Glidden. Welcome. Thanks for being here. If you could just kind of give us a brief presentation on what you've got going on, that would be great, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so I am proposing to change the zoning from URD1 to MSD. 12 Wiley Street currently meets all the setbacks for code with 6 feet from the road and 5 feet from both sides and the rear from all surrounding properties. It also follows the parking code, which is 1 parking space per dwelling unit. To qualify as a parking spot, the space has to be 9 by 18, and Wiley Street has 2,461 square feet of parking space. And then I printed this out. This is 12 Wiley Street, and the circle is about 375 feet from 12 Wiley. In this circle, there's 25 single families and 19 multifamilies. Also, one retail property, Summit Sound, which is right here, and also a boarding home sober house. And there's a 4-unit right beside Wiley and behind on Cottage Street.
Exactly what we were just talking about a minute ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
I just want to note for the board real quick, there was a typo in the description. It's actually 0.15 acres, which is significant, as
Yes.
for the number of units you can put on there, so.
Thank you. I was actually gonna ask that question. And also, there's a typo in there about, it's not, it says it's on Stillwater. It's not on Stillwater, it's on Wiley.
Yeah.
Any other comments from staff? Any Officer Colette? Nothing else on that? Board questions of the applicant?
I'm just
Member Jonas?
curious how many units are in there?
4.
4, thank you.
I'm gonna say at this point, you can be seated, and we will continue on and have you come back up if need be.
Okay.
But we're still on your item.
Okay.
So I will open this up for public comments on this particular item. So I'll take any public comments either in the meeting room or on Zoom. I don't see anyone either way. I'm going to close public comments on this item. A further review by the board or discussion. Member Boucher.
Anya, planning officer Colette, was there any indication as to why multi-family and service district was chosen over URD2?
So the lot size approximately is about 6,500 square feet, and URD2, in order for them to put, they would need 6,500 square feet would only let them put 2 units on that property,
I see.
so.
That was the discrepancy. And these are existing units, like a non-conformity, or is it the construction of a new? Is it go for the construction of a
Might be
new
a
property?
question.
isn't it?
Yep, please.
What was the question? Sorry.
This is
Yeah.
for the construction of a new property for a 4-unit?
Yeah, so it was legally a 3-unit, but it was running when I bought it as a 4-unit. And I'm putting, well, if it gets accepted, I'm gonna put in a fire system. I talked to Maine Fire, and so that's what has to go in, and then the zoning change has to be approved for it to be a legal 4-unit.
Member
So
Jones.
to clarify, it's operating as a 4-unit, although it's really only
Yes, legally 3-unit.
3-unit, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna just toss out, my usual concern with this type of project. I recognize completely that the applicant is up against it because you've bought what was, you say legal, but in essence it wasn't, because it was the URD1 when it was a 3-unit, so it was non-conforming is what illegal is not really the right word, but non-conforming is what we typically use, so. The entire Wiley Street is URD1, the entire, and it's in your pack, these are in your packets. And with the exception of a few properties here and there, zoned slightly different, most of that area is URD1. The code defines, this kind of goes back to what Chris was talking about earlier, the code defines URD1 district is established to enhance and protect the essential established characteristics of certain traditional low-density residential areas of mostly single-family detached dwellings, or where such development is desired, to promote and encourage a suitable environment for family life. And so if I'm a person from out of town and I'm coming in to buy a property on Wiley Street, given what the code says, this is what I would expect. And that's not really what is there, in essence. And it's what makes it hard for me to accept this kind of change. And it's why I voted against these sort of projects in the past. I believe that if we want to tackle this problem in a big way, as Chris earlier was talking about, I think the way to do it is as a neighborhood, on a neighborhood level. And Kristen mentioned it, but like what I brought up before, what Portland has done is they've taken, they don't actually call them URD1, but they've taken all their URD1 zone properties and made them URD2. And so that sort of resolved a lot of that problem, kind of like what we were just talking about. That's my thoughts on that one.
So I just want to, I think I've said it in the past, I just want to advise the board again that the guiding principles when you do look at zone changes are the comprehensive plan and whether you feel that it aligns with the comprehensive plan, and also the surrounding land uses. As was also noted in your packet, there are many other multi-units in the area. But just as far as case law goes, the courts do look at whether there's evidence that it aligns with the comprehensive plan. So you should just be thinking about that when you make your decision.
Yeah, I'm gonna comment on that as well, just to give you guys some more things to think about. And I think you all know, and I think the staff knows, I've struggled with this for a long while. I still have a hard time agreeing that this follows the comprehensive plan. You could argue that the comprehensive plan pushes for us to increase housing, but it doesn't say to spot zone in essence in order to do it. So it's a bit of a broad stroke. The comprehensive plan actually says that we should look at zone changes to increase housing, which we've already done in many ways, and we've done that through accessory dwelling units, LD 2003 compliance, tiny home updates, mobile home updates, height adjustments, and other minor code adjustments. The comprehensive plan does not suggest that we just take one property at a time and change the zone on it in order to solve this housing problem. The other thing that courts have suggested is that if you could argue that that this change aligns with the comprehensive plan, which I find somewhat dubious. It's supposed to be fair and equitable to properties that are surrounding it. And some of the properties that surround this property are URD1s. And so we would have a situation where we'd have one landowner who is profiting from multiple rentals, and they're not typically having as easy a time handling parking, trash, noise, etc., adjacent to somebody who is looking at what we described above as a suitable environment for family life. And I know, again, I go back to this is a conflict within our code. I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming us. But I'm not comfortable doing it one property at a time. I think if we're gonna fix it, we need to fix it on a wholesale level.
Chair, could I ask
Yes.
a question?
Member King?
To Planning Officer Collette. Were there any public comments or anything that may have come in to the planning office regarding this? No neighboring,
We didn't receive any.
okay.
And just want to advise too that, as we all know, our current code is very old and doesn't align with our current comprehensive plan. And people are empowered to apply for zoning amendments. So just want to put that out there.
Another thought I'll bring up. So I'm on a bit of a roll.
That's good.
Actually, it's a question I asked of Planning Officer Collette, because she provides us with a map that shows multi-units in various places around this area. And I'm curious where that data came from.
That's our tax data. Our tax data?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I found that pretty unreliable. I think in general, and I say this as a former home inspector, so I've seen a lot of these properties. You just can't tell if the tax card says 2 units, if it's 2 units or 3 units or 4 units. That's probably what you experienced. You had 3 units, but then you're trying to go to 4, but your tax card probably says 3? Not sure. So I find the data are also somewhat unreliable. I don't disagree that there isn't a lot of that, just as Member Boucher said earlier, this problem that we have of checkerboard sort of thing is certainly shown on that map. But I'm not sure we really know.
Yes, the chair.
Yes, Member King?
On the flip side, it could also be the other way around. There's several single-family units shown on the tax cards that could very well be 2 or more.
Correct. Yes. Everyone's quiet. We can go to a motion if you want to make a motion.
I would just ask, do we want to debate, because there is like, I think we all know there's like the issue of fairness and trying to work within a system that is a little bit challenging, and whether it's feasible to continue on with 3 units and look for a URD2 type of option that might be more fitting. It's the multifamily is so much more variability, and it introduces a lot more possibility as to what can happen in the future in that property. And I think that's what everyone's concern is. It's not just that it's gonna always be a 4-unit apartment building. It's gonna be possible that it takes on other accepted uses.
Chair, I have just one.
Member King?
Sorry. Do they still do with conditions for zone changes in the city?
I don't think so, I haven't seen that done, so.
What was your question?
If there
Yeah, I
was
was
still conditional, a zone change with conditions? For instance, if it were to be a zone change to URD2 with a condition allowing for the density to be smaller, or MNSD with condition to only allow 4 units on that particular property. I didn't know if that was something that,
I think you're thinking about contract zone?
some contract zone,
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
I apologize, contract
It's okay.
zone.
They have to apply for that
Yeah.
in a different way, and there's also like restrictions on, you can't restrict them to certain uses. And I guess we'd have to think about whether limiting their density does restrict their uses. I don't know, I'm not sure on that.
Because it might be an option, but it's a different application process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I would entertain a motion on this item. We would typically want to call it out as a not to pass. Member Boucher.
I move that the zone change for 12 Wiley Street, map lot 021-007, urban residence 1, district URD1 to multifamily and service district MSM and SD, not to pass.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
No.
Member Brush?
No.
Member Hayes?
No.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
No.
And the chair votes no. So the motion does not pass.
Do we need to give a reason for our no's?
Yes.
We do.
You should.
Yes. I want to make sure.
Anyone want to go first?
Is that the first no?
So my reason is it is spot zoning and inconsistent with the plan of the neighborhood.
Thank you. Member
I
Boucher?
share the same opinion, and I have a lot of sympathy for you, because I see how you sort of bought into this situation, and I think it's unfortunate. I do think, but that is, I share Member Bush's reasoning for why I said no.
Thank you. Member Jonas? You voted yes, right?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yeah, just because of the same situation and the surrounding homes in the area.
Thank you. Member King?
It seems as though it's a spot zoning. However, it just seems like it may have been, if there were other options, that could have been a better choice. I don't believe MNSD would be a good spot for that location.
Thank you. I think I've spoken my reasons already. So it does not pass. I'll leave it up to Planning Officer Collette to kind of contact with you afterwards to see what steps you might take from here and to go with this. I wouldn't entirely give up hope, because I do believe that the overall way we're gonna fix this problem is to address all of these properties that you brought, in on your map. You showed it on your map. So I think it needs fixing. I'm just not sure how. Okay?
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we got through that one. Let's go to land development permits. And so we've got 2 land development permit applications. The first is a land development permit application, site development plan, and minor subdivision for construction of a 2,400 square foot, 2-story building with 3 dwelling units at property located at 12 Carroll Street, map lot 024110, in the Urban Residence District 2. The applicant is Mobile Tech Plus LLC, Mr. Frank Pimetta.
Good evening, everyone. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're just trying to put a 3-unit on 12 Carroll Street. We've already
And
changed.
if I could just clarify, and you're Mr. Pimetta?
Yes, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, we're just trying to put a 3-unit on 12 Carroll Street. We've already got the zoning change from URD 1 to URD 2. And we're just trying to get permitted for it now. I have Randy Bragg with me here from the Carpenter Associates to answer any technical questions you guys might have.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
We'll bring it back up if we need to have more questions for you. So staff has indicated the completeness of this application and that it is ready for board review. Fees are documented and paid. The applicant's standing is confirmed. Can we get an update? Do you actually own the property?
I'm purchasing it from Jim Stone.
Right, so you don't own it yet, but we have the documentation that he is accepting as Brian sent that, thank you. Does the board have any questions or concerns with the completeness of the application, or are there any concerns with conflict of interest? Seeing none, I would take a motion on the application completeness, which is under procedural background in your packet for this item. Member Jones? Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I move the board find that the application was deemed complete on November 19th, 2024. The applicant paid all applicable fees per our Exhibit 3. The proposed project is a major site development and minor subdivision, and the plat was reviewed by the engineering department, and a written report was received from the city engineer on November 13th, 2024, as included as Exhibit 24 in our packets.
Thank you. Planning Officer Collette, can you help me out with this? I forget the difference between a major site development and a minor site development.
It's really just a matter of square footage, so minors under 1,000 square feet, majors above, and then also depends on the amount that they're disturbing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a motion on the procedural background and the application completeness. Can I get a second? Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazdett?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous on the procedural background. we've got the introduction and a brief presentation. Does staff have any other comments on this project? Other board member questions for staff or the applicants at this point? Seeing none. Public comments. I will open this up for public comment. I have 2 people on Zoom, so raise your hand on Zoom if you are here for public comment on this project. If not, and I don't see any, I will close this to public comment. So before going to motions on standards, do any of the board members have any issues they would like to bring up in particular before we go to voting? Seeing none, let's go right to the standards. Part 1, the project meets the requirements or is required to meet the Articles 2 through 12. I would look for a motion on the first item of Part 1. Member Brush.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 24, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-33's requirements regarding filling, grading, and earth moving activities, and Section 165-33.1's requirements regarding erosion and sediment control best practices.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member Basnet, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. A motion on number 2.
Mr. Chair,
Member Basnet?
I'll move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 21, the applicant satisfied the requirements of Land Development Code, Section 165-68 regarding lot frontage.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 3. Member Boucher?
I move that the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 5, 19, 21, and 24, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-72 requiring adequate parking spaces, Section 165-73 regarding parking area location, setbacks, and screening, and Section 165-74 regarding minimum design standards for surface parking and parking lot designs.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that item? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Motion on item 4. Member Jonas?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 5, 11, 23, and 24, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-79 and 80 requiring adequate connection to necessary utilities, including public water and sewer when possible.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Basnet? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous on item 4. Motion on item 5, please. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibit 2, 8, and 21, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-81 requiring appropriate lighting in accordance with regulations on intensity, direction, and height.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous on item 5. Motion on item 6. Member Hayes?
The board finds that based on Exhibit 2, 19, and 22, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-82 requiring adequate fire protection.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Basnet? Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous on item 6. Motion on item 7, please. Member Basnet?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 5, and 24, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 83 requiring adequate electrical services.
Thank you. A second on this item, Member Brush, thank you. Roll call vote, Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous on item 7. A motion on item 8, please. Member Boucher?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 6, and 24, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, section 165-84, requiring provisions for surface water and storm drainage.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote, Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous on item 8. Can I have a motion on item 9? Member Jonas?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 19, and 24, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code section 165-85 and section 165-86, requiring compliance with submitting information on anticipated sanitary flows and compliance with sewer regulations.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote, Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous on all items of Part 1, that's items 1 through 9. Part 2 requires the project to meet the district site development standards under Article 19. Can I have a motion on this single item on Part 2? Member King?
Mr. Chair, the board finds that based on Exhibit 25, 6, 9, 19, and 21, the applicant satisfied Sections 165-135 of the Land Development Code regarding height limits, floor area ratio, impervious surface ratio, buffer yards, and Section 165-136 regarding the location of egress doors.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Bazinet, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of Part 2. We move on to Part 3, which requires the project to meet Section 165-89, which is the Urban Residence 2 District. Have a motion on Part 3. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on the findings made in parts 1 and 2 of section 4 of this document, and based on exhibit 2 and 21, the project meets the requirements of section 165-89B for a permitted use within the Urban Residence 2 District.
Thank you. Member Bazinet, did you second on that?
I'll second that.
Thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member
Yes.
Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of Part 3. And moving on to Part 4, we have 4 items there. The project requires the criteria, is required to meet the criteria for a subdivision of land under Article 18. Could I have a motion on item 1? Member Hayes?
The board finds that based on the findings made in parts 1 through 3 of section 4 of this document, as well as exhibits 2, 5, 7, 15, 19, 21, 24, and 25, the project satisfies the requirements of Land Development Code, section 165-126.f1 regarding compliance with 30 AM RSA section 4404.
She was brave on that one. Can I have a second on that one? Member Jonas, thank you. And a roll call vote on item 1 of Part 4. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 1. Can I have a motion on item 2? Member Jonas?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 21, the project satisfies the requirements of Land Development Code section 165-126.f2 regarding the plat's conformance to existing zoning regulations regarding lot dimensions and areas.
Thank you. Do I have a second on item 2? Member Brush? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous on item 2. Can I have a motion on item 3? Member Brush?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 24, The project satisfied the requirements of Land Development Code Section 165-126F3 and 4 regarding the adjacency of the lot to an existing street and the side lot lines having appropriate angles to the street lines.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this one? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jones?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. A motion on item 4, please. Member Jones?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 19, and 24, the project satisfies the requirements of Land Development Code Section 165-126F6 regarding the plat containing all information required by Section 165-126D.
Thank you. Second on this item, Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That's unanimous approval of items 1 through 4 of Part 4. We'll move on to Part 5, which requires the project to meet the requirements of Section 165-114, the land approval standards. So can I have a motion on that first item? Member Boucher?
Chair, I move the board finds that based on the findings made in Part 4 of Section 4 of this document, the applicant satisfied the requirements of Land Development Code, Section 165-114A, regarding compliance with 30 AMRSA, Section 4000, or I'll just say 4404, and Article 18 of the Land Development Code.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Bazinet, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of 1. A motion on item 2, please. Member Bazinet?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 24, the applicant satisfied requirements of Land Development Code, Section 165-114.B through C, regarding the proposed parking lot, parking and loading layout, and the proposed access drives from the site to any public right-of-way being arranged in a reasonable and safe configuration, including provision for safe pedestrian travel.
Excellent, thank you. A second from Member Hayes. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 2. A motion on item 3. Member King?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 6, and 24, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Sections 165-114D's requirements for preventing adverse effects from runoff and ensuring there is adequate capacity of stormwater collection systems to handle runoff from the development.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 3. A motion on item 4, please. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 8, and 21, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114E's requirements that outdoor lighting shall be designed, installed, and maintained to avoid unreasonable adverse effects from light pollution.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Hayes? Thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jones?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 4. Item 5, a motion on this item, please. Member Jonas?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 19, and 21, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-114F's requirements for landscaping, tree preservation, and species type for plantings.
Thank you. And a second on this item. Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 5. Motion on item 6. Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 21, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, Section 165-114G's requirements for building and location setbacks.
Thank you. A second on this item. Member Brush, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So unanimous approval of all standards, which leaves us with a motion on the decision itself. Could I have a motion on this decision? Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that the project meets the requirements for a land development permit for a major site development and minor subdivision, and therefore grants the land development permit for the proposed project.
Thank you. Second on that, Member King. Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of all items. The project is approved. Thanks for coming in, you guys. Appreciate the work. Yep. You can reach out to the Code Enforcement Office for more guidance from here if you need to, but I think you guys probably know that.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the last item on the agenda this evening. Thank you for waiting. Apologize for your having to wait. Land development permit application, site development plan for removal of an existing building with the construction of a deck and a 1,050 square foot greenhouse and reconfiguration of a parking lot, right? It's supposed to say parking lot. Property located at 876 Stillwater Avenue, map lot R61006A in the Shopping and Personal Services District. The applicant is Trillium Engineering Group. The owner is Blue Seal Feeds Incorporated. Staff has indicated the completeness of this application and ready for board review. Fees are documented and paid. The applicant's standing is confirmed. Does the board have any questions about the completeness of the application or any concerns with conflict of interest? If so, now is the time. Seeing no hands, I would take a motion on the application completeness, which is found under your procedural background in the front of this particular project description. I would take a motion on that. Member Jonas?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that the application was deemed complete on November 19th, 2024, that the applicant paid all applicable fees as illustrated in Exhibit 3, and that the proposed project is a major site development.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Second. Member Bazinet? Yep, thank you. And a roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we are accepting of the application being complete. So before we get to the standards, I would like the applicant, Mr. Dugan?
Yes.
Eric Dugan?
Yep, Eric Dugan, Trillium Engineering, civil structural engineer.
Great, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it. Here with James Gibbons from Blue Seal. And I mean, we've been round and round with Planning Officer Colette, trying to figure it out with the zoning and specifically the display space. So that's how we ended up with, kind of went back and forth about really just trying to do a facelift for the existing metal building that's out front, and really we're gonna take that space, we're gonna demolish that, take that space, move it inside. So really utility is gonna remain intact the way they are, and then we're just gonna do an outside building so we don't trip that over the 1% exterior display space. And that's essentially what we're talking about at this point.
Yep.
So trying to clean up the yard, give it, like I said, a little bit of facelift. So here to
Excellent.
answer any questions.
Excellent, thank you. And you know, we've got a lot of information in our packets too, but I appreciate you giving us a brief summary there. Staff comments on this one?
Just wanted to say we met with the Pinjajawat Commission this morning. Their only recommendation was that in the greenhouse, if the board can condition, and it's up to you, of course, if you can condition there being a conversation with the code and wastewater departments about possibly putting a floor drain in there, to see if that's even a possibility. And if that is something that both parties are okay with, then then we would have a modified site plan within 30 days of approval. So,
Member Bassett?
What would be the necessity for that?
one of the commissioners was concerned about like watering plants that maybe had fertilizer or pesticides, and that water draining off into like the stream that's nearby or the Njajawak, or into the storm drain, which stormwater is not treated like sewer, so.
Thank you. Do we need to add that as a condition or anything, or is that just comments that they had?
They recommended that it be a condition, so if you all agree to make it a condition, then you would just put that on the decision at the end.
Chair,
Member Bazinet?
what does Home Depot do with their greenhouse? They're right in the same area, aren't they? Kinda, sorta.
Certainly.
Do they have to have floor drain?
No idea.
They do have a floor drain.
Yeah, they certainly
They
do.
do.
None of us knows where it goes.
Yeah. I don't know if it goes into stormwater or.
I bet it doesn't go into the sewer.
Yeah.
I bet it
I was
goes
about
into
to say, would it
stormwater.
go into sewer?
Member King?
Has the greenhouse been utilized the same way all these years without changing? Is this something that's always been, the water's always run in the same place for all these years? Yes.
I'm sorry, James Gibbons from Blue Sylvania.
Thank you.
Please come up to the podium
Just a
and
little
introduce yourself.
clarification so we understand it
Just so we
better.
record it, yeah. Thank you.
Yes and no, so the greenhouse is a new application.
Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, James Gibbons from Blue Seal Feeds, project manager. So the greenhouse itself is a new application, the structure itself. Currently, there's an existing building there. But for years upon years, we have operated with a garden center on the opposite side of the property that actually abuts the, I'm gonna butcher it,
Njajawak.
Marsh there. And we watered plants there for 50 some odd years, so really, we're just bringing it to the other side of the property now, so.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Member Jonas, did you have your hand raised?
I did.
Do you want to ask a question?
It kind of backtracks just a little bit, if that's okay. Just a question for Mr. Davis. This is one of the places where the stormwater and the sanitary sewers are separate, isn't it?
Yeah, there's separate systems.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Because
Good question. Okay, so let's see, where were we? We were kind of on staff comments, and then we got to board member questions for the staff of the applicant. Any other board member questions of the applicant? I'm gonna open this up to public comments. You can stay up, but just be aware. I don't expect a lot. But we do have this item open for public comments. I don't see anyone on Zoom, but we have the blueprints up. If there is anyone on Zoom,
I don't see anybody.
nothing. Okay, thank you. So no public comments in the room, so I'm gonna close this for public comments. And so before going to motions on standards, do board members have any other issues they would like to bring up before we get to the voting? If not, Mr. Dubé, you can sit down because you want to stand through all this, I'm sure.
Thank you.
And let's move on to the project standards, if we could, please. And
I have
so,
a question. Do we
Member
have to
Brush.
vote on the proposal from the Penjajawak Commission about the drainage?
well, we would vote on that as a condition at the decision time. Is that right?
That's right.
I probably will need some guidance when we get there, but, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
can we ask the applicant if they're willing to consider that? I didn't
Certainly.
know if we didn't really, we talked around it a bit, but I don't know if we.
Yep, we don't always remember to do that, but we certainly can. So the question is just, if we make this a condition, is the applicant willing to make the necessary drainage requirements so it's not, this watering area is not dumping into the Penjajawak?
So connecting to the sewer or storm drain?
I think the
Thank you.
intent was the sewer.
sanitary sewer.
Yeah.
One pipe or the other?
Sure. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, it's pretty simple. We have an existing connection in there or close to. right now, so we can certainly make that happen and make sure frost-free and things like that,
Okay.
so.
We know that would follow code, right?
Well, it would be expected, it has to follow code by the city standards.
I understand that, but do we have to call out tonight that it could indeed go into the sewer line as opposed to the stormwater?
I think we could just say it's at the discretion of the sanitary sewer department.
Yeah, so the intent was that it go into the sewer line, but of course, the conversation hasn't been had with sewer. So the idea is that the condition would say they have the conversation with wastewater and code to make sure that's actually possible.
It's
And-
probably easier for the applicant to tie into one line other than the other, I would think.
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, I don't know that we know where the pipes are there. I assume
We do.
they're both probably close to each other, but I have no idea.
Not so much the storm drain on that, but the reality is it's gonna be a building with a slab that we can slope in, and so most of the water is not even gonna get outside the greenhouse.
Anyway, yeah.
So the situation that currently exists is not going, it's gonna be improved by the fact that you have a greenhouse and the fact that you have most of the water that waters the plants, for instance, and that's what we're talking about specifically, is gonna be within the potted plant itself.
Yeah.
And then anything else that falls on top of this concrete slab is just really gonna be sitting there or absorbed in the slab.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of what's going to happen versus what happens now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
But the answer is yes.
Yes, which
If
is
we
important.
decide to do it that way, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Boucher, did you have something on top of that? Did you want to?
I was gonna ask our engineer, if there was any input you had on the stormwater versus the wastewater for this scenario, but it sounded like we're just gonna table it for if we consider this a condition for the approval, they would have a conversation with that department specifically and get their input and
It'll be up to them,
make a
wouldn't be up to
appropriate
us.
decision.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you have any input?
Just- When you mentioned Home Depot, that's an open site there.
Great big-
So those 4 drains are for the storm,
Yeah,
for
it's
the
for the
rainwater.
stormwater,
And that
yeah.
doesn't go in the sewer, that goes in the storm drain system
Yeah.
there. But for this, I'll leave that up to Amanda if she wants to accept
Okay.
that.
Because in general, we don't wanna put too much water and stormwater through the sewer system, right? If we can avoid it.
Yeah, we try to separate where we can, of
Yeah.
course, but, I mean, I don't know if she considers this just like a utility, kind of like a utility kind of sink that everything gets washed down, that goes to sewer. This isn't, this is a closed system here. This isn't, allowing rainwater to come into it and stuff like that, so. I would leave that up to her.
Okay,
You have,
thank you.
Is there an issue?
Oh, I have tissues.
Do you want to take a moment?
Yeah, I'll give you an issue.
I have tissues. John.
Maybe I'll set.
Sorry.
It's okay. Believe it or not, this happened at one other meeting I was at one time. It was really strange. And it's-
Sorry.
take as much time as you need. You're all right to keep going?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just.
Okay, just a scratch or whatever, yeah. Okay. All right, so we are going to look at putting a condition on the decision with regard to the drainage of the watering area. Nonetheless, we are still at the standards, which we haven't really tackled yet. So the first part is that the projects meet the requirements of Articles 2 through 12. And so I would take motions on the first item of Part 1. Member Bassett?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 11, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-33's requirements regarding filling, grading, and earth-moving activities, and Section 165-33.1's requirements regarding erosion, sediment control, best practices.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this? I had a bunch of them, so I'm going with Member Brush first.
There you go.
because he's always, Roll call vote, Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 1. A motion on item 2. Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 10, and 12, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, Section 165-72, requiring adequate parking spaces, including handicap accessible spaces, Section 165-73, regarding parking area location, setbacks, and screening, and Section 165-74, regarding minimum design standards for surface parking and parking lot design.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Basnet? Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on item 2. A motion on item 3, please. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 11, and 12, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code Section 165-79 and 80, requiring adequate connection to necessary utilities, public water, and sewer when possible.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Hayes, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 3. Motion on item 4, please. Member King?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 13, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-82, requiring adequate fire protection.
Thank you. Could I have a second on this item? Member Hayes? Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval on item 4. Could I have a motion on item 5? Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibit 2 and 11, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code Section 165-83, requiring adequate electrical services.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 5. A motion on item 6, please. Member Boucher?
I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2 and 11, the applicant satisfied the Land Development Code, Section 165-84, requiring provisions for surface water and storm drainage.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Jonas, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That is unanimous approval of all items in Part 1. And so we'll move on to Part 2, requiring the project to meet district site development standards under Article 19. Can I have a motion on this one item? Member Jonas.
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibits 2, 10, 11, and 12, the applicant satisfied Section 165-135 of the Land Development Code regarding height limits, building envelope standards, floor area ratio, impervious surface ratio, and buffer yards.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member King, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of Part 2. Moving on to Part 3, which requires the project to meet Section 165-101 of the Shopping and Personal Services District. Motion on this item. Member Basnet?
Mr. Chair, I'll move the board finds that based on the findings made in Parts 1 and 2 of Section 4 of this document and based on Exhibit 2 and 10, the project meets the requirements of Section 165-101B for permitted use within the shopping and personal service district.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Brush, thank you. Roll call vote on Part 3. Member Basnet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So it's unanimous approval of Part 3. Part 4 requires the project to meet the requirements of 165-1081, the Penjajoic Marsh Overlay Zone. Can I have a motion on this item? Member King?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on Exhibit 2 and the findings made in Parts 1 through 3 of Section 4, of this document, the project meets the requirements of section 165-108.1 regarding projects located in the Pajadrawak Marsh Overlay Zone.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Brush, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of Part 4. Moving on to Part 5, which requires the project to meet Section 165-114 of the Land Development Approval Standards. Motion on item 1. Member Boucher?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 10 through 12, the applicant satisfied the requirements of Land Development Code, section 165-114 B through C regarding proposed parking and loading layout and proposed access drives from the site to any public right-of-way being arranged in a reasonable and safe configuration, including the provision of safe pedestrian travel to all on-site users.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Bazinet? Thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 1. Do I have a motion on item 2? Member Hayes?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2, 11, and 12, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, section 165-114D's requirements for preventing adverse effects from the stormwater runoff and ensuring adequate capacity of stormwater collection systems to handle runoff from the development.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Bazinet, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 2. Have a motion on item 3. Member Brush?
Mr. Chair, I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 10, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code section 165-114F's requirements for landscaping, tree preservation, and species type.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Member Boucher, thank you. Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Unanimous approval of item 3. Motion on item 4, please. Member Boucher?
I move the board finds that based on exhibits 2 and 10, the applicant satisfied Land Development Code, section 165-114G's requirements for building location and setbacks.
Thank you. Do I have a second on this item? Thank you. Member King? Roll call vote. Member Bazinet?
Yes.
Member Boucher?
Yes.
Member Brush?
Yes.
Member Hayes?
Yes.
Member Jonas?
Yes.
Member King?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That's unanimous approval on all standards, including the last section 5. So I would take a motion on the decision, and we want to add a condition that the plant watering area would allow for drainage according to the requirements of Bangor Sanitary District.
I would recommend phrasing it as the applicants work with wastewater and code on a drain to the sewer system within the greenhouse.
Okay.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, the applicants work with the code enforcement and wastewater department to put a floor drain to, I guess you could say, yeah, floor drain to the sewer system in the greenhouse. And I was thinking you might just want to add, if that's feasible, they submit modified site plans within 30 days.
Yeah, we should give a schedule, yeah, so within 30 days. Member Boucher?
The board finds that the project meets the requirement.
You need to make a motion.
I move that the board finds that the project meets the requirements of the land development permit for a major site development and therefore grants the land development permit for the proposed project with the condition that the evidence obtained on impact fee in the amount of $437.22 is paid to the engineering department prior to the issuance of the building permit. And the condition as well that the applicant review the placement of a drain in the greenhouse with the code enforcement and wastewater department. And in the event that they develop a plan, that they submit a modified site plan within 30 days.
Excellent, thank you. And do I have a second on that? Member King, you were doing a lot of work over there, you want to do the second?
Sure.
Thank you. So I have a roll
Writing it
call.
out too? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's good, I was glad you were both writing down, I didn't have to worry about it.
No.
We could do it again.
Well, I was just writing verbatim what she said, that's all.
Roll call vote on this decision, Member Basnet,
Yes.
Member Boucher,
Yes.
Member Brush,
Yes.
Member Hayes,
Yes.
Member Jonas,
Yes.
Member King.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So your project is approved with that one condition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, appreciate your patience.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Okay, that is it for our agenda this evening, except for any other comments or questions. Does anyone have any other comments or questions this evening? We don't have anything we have to sign. Fine, Watkins.
Ready?
There you go.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time.
Good night, guys.